The heating oil truck was less than 50 feet from my driveway when Patricia Monroe stepped into the middle of Oakwood Lane with her hands raised like she was stopping a bank robbery. I watched from my kitchen window as the driver hit the brakes, confusion written all over his face, while Patricia marched toward his cab with that particular stride that meant someone's day was about to get ruined. It was January in Worcester, Massachusetts, and the temperature hadn't climbed above 15 degrees in 3 days. My oil tank was sitting at 12%, which meant I had maybe 2 days of heat left if I was lucky. The delivery was supposed to happen yesterday, but the company had called to reschedule because of the ice storm that had rolled through New England. Now Patricia was out there, her perfectly highlighted blonde hair barely moving in the frigid wind, gesturing wildly at the driver while pointing at a clipboard she had materialized from somewhere. I grabbed my coat and headed outside, my boots crunching on the salt I had spread across my walkway that morning. The cold hit me like a physical wall, the kind of January freeze that made your nostrils stick together when you breathed in. "What's going on?" I called out as I approached. Patricia turned toward me, and I saw that look I had come to know too well in the 18 months since she had been elected president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. It was a mixture of righteous indignation and barely concealed glee, the expression of someone who had finally caught you breaking a rule you didn't know existed. "Yates Edwards, your heating oil delivery is in violation of HOA regulations," she announced, her voice carrying down the street despite the wind. "All service vehicles must submit a request form 72 hours in advance of any delivery to properties within Maple Ridge." I stared at her, certain I had misheard. "Patricia, it's heating oil. My tank is almost empty. I need this delivery." "The rules are very clear," she said, tapping her clipboard. "Section 7, subsection C. All commercial vehicles entering the community for service purposes must be pre-approved by the HOA board. This is to maintain the aesthetic standards and safety protocols of our neighborhood." The truck driver, a guy in his 50s named Ron who I had seen making deliveries in this area for years, leaned out his window. "Lady, I've got 12 more stops today. Can we just do this?" "Absolutely not," Patricia said. "Mr. Edwards failed to file the proper paperwork. Until he does so and receives board approval, no delivery can take place." "This is insane," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "There's no such rule. I've lived here for 4 years and never heard of any requirement for heating oil deliveries." Patricia's smile widened. "The regulation was passed at the November meeting. All homeowners received email notification." "I was never notified," I said. "That's not the HOA's responsibility if you don't check your email regularly," she replied. "The meeting minutes are also posted on the community website." Ignorance of the rules doesn't exempt you from following them. Ron was looking at me with sympathy. "Look, buddy, I don't want to get involved in neighborhood politics, but if she's saying I can't deliver, I can't deliver. I'm not getting my company sued. Patricia, it's 15 degrees outside. My heat is going to run out. Can't we just do the delivery now and I'll file whatever paperwork you need after?" "Rules are rules, Yates. If we make exceptions for one person, the entire structure breaks down. You can submit your request form online and the board will review it at our next meeting." "When's the next meeting?" "Next Thursday evening." "That's 10 days from now." The words came out louder than I intended. "My oil will run out by tomorrow night." Patricia shrugged, a gesture that seemed practiced. "Perhaps you should have planned better. Or you could have attended the HOA meetings where these important regulations are discussed. This is what happens when homeowners don't participate in their community governance." I turned to Ron. "Can you come back tomorrow morning? I'll have whatever paperwork she needs filed by tonight." Ron shook his head. Sorry, man. My route doesn't come back through Worcester until next week. I can put you down for next Friday if you want. Next Friday? That's 9 days from now. I'll freeze. Not my call, Ron said, and I could hear genuine regret in his voice. Take it up with your HOA. Patricia was already walking away, satisfied with her morning's work. The truck began backing up, Ron giving me an apologetic wave as he maneuvered back onto the main road. I stood there in the middle of the street, the cold seeping through my coat, watching my heat supply literally drive away. When I got back inside, my house felt colder already, though I knew that was just psychological. I pulled up the HOA website on my laptop, searching for any mention of this service vehicle regulation. Sure enough, buried in the November meeting minutes was a single paragraph about new commercial vehicle protocols. The vote had passed 3-2, with Patricia naturally voting in favor. I checked my email and found the notification from November 28th. It had gone to my spam folder, probably because the HOA sent out so many messages about trivial violations that my email filter had learned to categorize them as junk. The subject line read, "Important updates to Maple Ridge Community Standards," which could have meant anything from new landscaping requirements to parking restrictions. The request form was 4 pages long. It required detailed information about the service provider, including insurance certificates, vehicle registration numbers, estimated time of arrival, estimated duration of service, and a detailed description of the work to be performed. There was a section for the homeowner to explain why the service was necessary and why it couldn't be performed by an HOA-approved vendor. At the bottom was a note that all requests required a minimum of 72 hours for review and approval, though the board reserved the right to take longer if additional information was needed. I started filling it out, my fingers cold even though I was inside. The insurance information took 20 minutes to get from the oil company, who seemed baffled by the request. The vehicle registration number required another phone call. By the time I had completed the entire form and hit submit, it was nearly noon. The automatic reply informed me that my request had been received and would be reviewed in the order it was submitted. Current processing time was 5 to 7 business days. I called the oil company and explained the situation. They told me exactly what I expected. They couldn't send a truck back out without HOA approval if the HOA had explicitly blocked service. It was a liability issue. They offered to put me on a rush list if I got approval, but otherwise, their next available delivery to my area was Friday of the following week. My thermostat read 68 degrees. The furnace was running, burning through the last of my oil to fight against the 15-degree weather outside. I turned the heat down to 62, grabbed an extra sweater, and started researching my options. Electric space heaters were the obvious choice, but they were expensive to run, and my house was too big to heat effectively with them. I could get a hotel room for a few days, but that seemed like an absurd expense because of an HOA power trip. I could also file a complaint against Patricia with the HOA board, but she was the board president, and I knew exactly how that would go. What I really wanted to do was understand what Patricia's endgame was. We had never been friends, but we had never been enemies either. I kept my lawn maintained, my house painted within approved colors, and generally stayed out of HOA drama. I attended maybe one meeting a year, usually when something directly affected me. I paid my dues on time and had never received a violation notice. Then, I remembered the October meeting. I had actually gone to that one, because Patricia had proposed raising the annual HOA dues by 40% to fund new decorative street lamps that nobody wanted. I had been one of about 20 homeowners who spoke against the measure, pointing out that our current street lighting was perfectly adequate, and the money would be better spent on actually maintaining the community pool and playground equipment. The measure had been voted down 62 to 15. Patricia had been furious. She had spent 15 minutes after the vote lecturing everyone about vision and progress and how people like us were holding the community back from reaching its full potential. She had looked directly at me twice during that speech, so this was revenge. This was Patricia using her position to punish me for having the audacity to disagree with her at a public meeting. The heating oil rule was probably written specifically with situations like this in mind, giving her the power to make homeowners miserable whenever she felt like it. I spent the afternoon calling every HOA board member I could reach. Out of the 5 total board members, I managed to get through to 2. The first, a retired accountant named Bill Henderson, listened sympathetically, but told me his hands were tied. Patricia ran the meetings with an iron fist, and he had learned it was easier to just go along with her most of the time. The second board member, a woman named Jennifer Ortiz, was more direct. Yates, between you and me, Patricia has turned this HOA into her personal kingdom. Half the regulations we've passed in the last year are completely unnecessary, but she's got the votes. She's convinced Martha and Greg that stricter rules increase property values, and they vote with her on everything. Bill and I are constantly outvoted 3 to 2. So what am I supposed to do? Just freeze for the next week. I'll try to push for an emergency board vote, but I can tell you right now it won't happen. Patricia will say you had plenty of notice and this is a consequence of not following proper procedures. She loves consequences. This is insane. Tell me about it. Last month, she fined the Kowalskis $300 because their Christmas lights were up 3 days past the January 1st deadline. They were just busy with family stuff and didn't get around to taking them down immediately. Patricia drove by their house every day until she could issue the fine. I thanked Jennifer and hung up, feeling more trapped than ever. The temperature outside had dropped to 12 degrees. My furnace was still running, but I could see the oil gauge dropping in my mind's eye, each degree of heat costing me another hour of warmth. That evening, I bundled up and drove to Home Depot. I bought 3 electric space heaters, extra blankets, and enough weather stripping to seal every window in my house. The total came to just over $400, money I wouldn't have had to spend if Patricia hadn't decided to play petty dictator. When I got home, I saw Patricia outside her house, 3 doors down from mine. She was standing in her driveway talking to a man in a black jacket. I didn't think much of it until I started unloading my purchases and heard the rumble of a truck engine. A heating oil truck drove past my house and pulled up to Patricia's property. The man in the black jacket directed the driver to her oil tank. I watched, my hands full of Home Depot bags as they hooked up the hose and began pumping oil into Patricia's tank. No clipboard in sight. No 72-hour waiting period. No 4-page request form. The driver caught me staring and had the decency to look uncomfortable. Patricia saw me too and gave a little wave, as if she was greeting a neighbor on a pleasant spring day rather than rubbing my face in her hypocrisy. I went inside before I said something I would regret. The space heaters helped, but they were loud and they made the air feel dry and dusty. I set one up in my bedroom, one in the living room, and one in my home office where I worked remotely. The rest of the house I just let get cold, closing doors to try to keep the heat concentrated in the rooms I actually used. By morning, the temperature in my kitchen was 54 degrees. The furnace had run out of oil sometime around 3 in the morning. I had woken up shivering despite 2 comforters and a space heater running 5 feet from my bed. The house felt like a tomb, all cold surfaces and stale air. I checked my email obsessively, hoping for a response to my service request. Nothing. The HOA website showed my request as under review. Wednesday was worse. The temperature outside dropped to 8 degrees, with wind chills below zero. The space heaters were fighting a losing battle against the cold. I wore layers inside my house: thermal underwear, jeans, 2 sweaters, and a fleece jacket. My office felt like a refrigerator. I had to keep shaking my hands to keep them warm enough to type. I called the oil company again, practically begging them to send a truck. They repeated what they had already told me, not without HOA approval. I called Jennifer Ortiz and asked if she had made any progress. She had tried, but Patricia had refused to call an emergency meeting, stating that this was not a true emergency but rather poor planning on my part. That afternoon, I saw Patricia outside again, this time checking her mailbox. She was wearing a light sweater. A light sweater in 8-degree weather. She waved at me again when she saw me watching from my window. Thursday morning, I woke up to pipes rattling. The temperature in my bathroom had dropped to 47 degrees, cold enough that I was risking frozen pipes. I turned on all my faucets to a trickle, hoping the movement would keep the water from freezing and bursting the pipes. I moved my 3rd space heater into the bathroom and aimed it at the wall where the pipes ran. I had to get out of the house. I drove to a coffee shop in downtown Worcester and spent most of the day there, nursing drinks and using their Wi-Fi to work. Other people came and went, enjoying their warm homes and their functioning heating systems. I felt like I was living in some kind of bizarre alternate reality where HOA regulations could literally leave you freezing. When I got home that evening, my house was barely warmer than the outside air. The space heaters had done their best, but heating a 3-bedroom house in a New England winter with electricity alone was impossible. I checked my email again. Still no response to my service request. Friday morning started with the weather forecast. A major cold front was moving in over the weekend. Temperatures were expected to drop into the single digits, with Saturday night potentially reaching 5 below zero. Wind chills could hit -20. I was done playing by Patricia's rules. I called a different oil company, one from outside the immediate area, and explained that I needed an emergency delivery. I didn't mention the HOA. I didn't mention approval forms. I just told them my tank was empty and I was freezing. They said they could get someone out Saturday morning. Then I called a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. His name was Marcus Levine, and his website promised aggressive representation against overreaching homeowners associations. His secretary scheduled me for a consultation Monday morning. Friday afternoon, I got an email. Not from the HOA, but from my neighbor 2 houses down, an elderly woman named Dorothy Chang who I occasionally helped with yard work. The subject line read, "Thought you should know." The email was brief. "Yates, I heard what Patricia did to you with the oil delivery. That's terrible, especially in this weather. I thought you should know that she uses Superior Comfort Oil Company for her deliveries and her cousin owns it. That's why she can get same-day service whenever she wants. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. Stay warm, Dorothy." I read the email 3 times. Patricia's cousin owned an oil company. Patricia had created a regulation requiring HOA approval for all service vehicles, giving her the power to block competitors while allowing her cousin's company unrestricted access. That wasn't just petty revenge. That was corruption. That was using her position for personal financial benefit. I forwarded the email to Jennifer Ortiz with a note asking if she knew about Patricia's relationship to Superior Comfort Oil. Then, I started digging. Superior Comfort Oil Company had a website with an About page. The owner was listed as Michael Monroe. A quick Facebook search confirmed that Michael Monroe and Patricia Monroe were indeed related. His profile listed her as a family member, and there were photos of them together at various family gatherings. I took screenshots of everything. The company website, the Facebook profiles, the photos. I documented every email and phone call related to my block delivery. I wrote down a timeline of events, including the dates I had seen Patricia get a delivery without any apparent approval process. Saturday morning arrived with the promised Arctic blast. The temperature was 4 degrees. My house was uninhabitable. I had closed off everything except my bedroom, running all 3 space heaters in that single room just to keep it above 50 degrees. The rest of the house was freezing. I could see my breath in the kitchen. At 8 in the morning, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Ron, the original delivery driver, standing on my porch. "Thought that was you," he said. "I picked up a weekend shift with your new company. Heard you needed an emergency delivery." "You have no idea," I said. "Can you do it?" "That's why I'm here." "Where's your tank?" I showed him around back. He was hooking up the hose when I heard a car door slam. Patricia came marching around the corner of my house, still wearing that light sweater despite the freezing temperature. "What is going on here?" she demanded. "Getting my heating oil delivered," I said calmly. "You don't have approval. This is a direct violation of HOA regulations. I'm going to have to fine you." "Fine me all you want, Patricia. I'm getting this delivery." Ron kept working, pointedly ignoring the confrontation. Patricia turned to him. "Sir, you are trespassing on HOA property. If you don't leave immediately, I'll call the police." "I'm delivering heating oil to a paying customer on his property," Ron said without looking at her. "That's not trespassing." Patricia pulled out her phone. "We'll see what the police have to say about that." She actually called them. I watched her speak to the dispatcher, explaining that a service vehicle was violating HOA regulations and refusing to leave. The dispatcher must have asked some clarifying questions because Patricia's face started to redden. "Yes, it's his property, but the HOA has jurisdiction over all service providers. We have regulations. No, this isn't about property damage. It's about following community standards." "What do you mean that's not a police matter?" She listened for another moment, her expression darkening. "Fine, thank you for nothing." She hung up and glared at me. "This isn't over, Yates. You're going to receive a fine for this violation, and if you don't pay it, we'll put a lien on your property." "You do what you need to do, Patricia, but I'm curious about something. When you get oil delivered, you file a request form 72 hours in advance." "That's none of your business." "Actually, it is my business, because I found it interesting that you got a delivery on Monday with no apparent delay, and I found it even more interesting that Superior Comfort Oil is owned by your cousin Michael." Patricia's face went blank for just a second before she recovered. "My personal relationships have nothing to do with HOA governance." "Really? Because it seems like you created a regulation that lets you block any oil company except the one your cousin owns." "That's called a conflict of interest, Patricia. Some might even call it corruption. You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about, and so will everyone else at the next HOA meeting." "There won't be anything to talk about because you're going to be fined so heavily that you'll wish you had just followed the rules." Ron finished the delivery and handed me the receipt. "You're all set, Mr. Edwards. Tank's full. Should last you a couple months if this cold keeps up." "Thanks, Ron. I appreciate you coming out on a Saturday." "No problem. Stay warm." As soon as Ron left, Patricia started listing all the fines I was going to receive. Unauthorized service provider, failure to obtain proper approvals, creating a disturbance in the community. She was up to $2,000 in fines when I cut her off. Save it for the meeting, Patricia. You can explain all of this to the other homeowners. I'm sure they'll be very interested in your cousin's oil company. I went inside and closed the door. My furnace kicked on 20 minutes later, beautiful warm air flowing through the vents. The house started to warm up slowly, the ice inside the windows beginning to melt. I stood next to a heating vent and just enjoyed the warmth. That afternoon, I sent a detailed email to every single homeowner in the Maple Ridge community. I explained what had happened with my block delivery, Patricia's relationship to Superior Comfort Oil, and the suspicious timing of the new service vehicle regulations. I attached all my screenshots and documentation. I ended the email by calling for Patricia's resignation and a full review of all regulations passed since she had become president. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. Other homeowners calling to share their own stories of Patricia's abuse of power. The family who got fined for Christmas lights. A man who had been denied permission to install solar panels because Patricia thought they were ugly. A woman who had been threatened with daily fines because her lawn was half an inch too tall during a week when she was hospitalized. The stories went on and on. Jennifer Ortiz called me that evening. Yates, your email has stirred up a hornet's nest. I've gotten about 40 calls from homeowners demanding an emergency meeting. Patricia is freaking out. She's sent 3 emails in the last hour saying your claims are defamatory and threatening legal action. Let her threaten whatever she wants. Can you call the emergency meeting? I'm working on it. I need 2 other board members to agree. Bill is on board. I'm waiting to hear from Martha. If she agrees, we can overrule Patricia and schedule something for this week. What about the fines Patricia threatened me with? Honestly, I don't think they'll hold up. The conflict of interest issue is huge. If she's been using HOA regulations to benefit her cousin's business, that's grounds for removal from the board and possibly legal action. I've already contacted our HOA attorney to get their opinion. Sunday morning, the temperature was 5 below zero. My house was warm and comfortable, my furnace running smoothly on a full tank of oil. I made coffee and watched the news, feeling human for the first time in days. At noon, Patricia called me. I considered not answering but decided it might be interesting. Yates, we need to talk. I don't think we have anything to talk about, Patricia. You've caused a lot of trouble with your email. People are upset. Good. They should be upset. You've been abusing your position. I have done nothing but try to maintain standards in this community. Everything I've done has been within my authority as HOA president. Everything except the part where you created regulations to help your cousin's business. There was a long pause. When Patricia spoke again, her voice was different, less aggressive. What do you want? I want you to resign as HOA president. I want all the regulations you've passed in the last year reviewed by an independent attorney. And I want a formal apology to every homeowner you've fined or harassed. That's not going to happen. Then we'll do this the hard way. I've already scheduled a consultation with an attorney who specializes in HOA disputes. I'm sure other homeowners will join me in whatever action I decide to take. Your choice, Patricia. You can resign with some dignity, or you can be forced out. She hung up without another word. Monday morning, I met with Marcus Levine. His office was in a modern building overlooking Lake Quinsigamond, all glass and steel. Marcus himself was in his 50s, with gray hair and the confident demeanor of someone who had fought a lot of battles. I laid out everything that had happened. He took notes and asked detailed questions about the HOA's governing documents, Patricia's actions, and the timeline of events. When I got to the part about her cousin's oil company, he actually smiled. "This is good. This is very good. Not for you, obviously, dealing with this situation. But for a case, this is solid. Using her position on the HOA board to benefit a family member's business is a clear conflict of interest and a breach of her fiduciary duty to the homeowners. The fact that she blocked your delivery during a winter emergency while allowing her cousin's company unrestricted access makes it even worse. Can we force her off the board? Absolutely. I'd recommend starting with a demand letter, outlining the conflict of interest and demanding her immediate resignation. If she refuses, we file a formal complaint and petition the court for an injunction. Given the clear evidence of misconduct, I think we'd have a strong case. How much is this going to cost? My retainer is $5,000, but here's the thing. If other homeowners join the action, we can split the costs. From what you've told me, there are plenty of people who have issues with Patricia's leadership. We could organize them into a class action of sorts. Also, if we win, we can request that the HOA reimburse legal fees since Patricia's actions violated her duties to the community. I signed the retainer agreement. Marcus said he would draft a demand letter by end of day Tuesday and send it to Patricia via certified mail. He also advised me to document everything going forward and to avoid any direct confrontation with Patricia that could be twisted against me. That evening, Jennifer Ortiz sent out an email announcing an emergency HOA meeting scheduled for Thursday evening at 7. The agenda included a discussion of conflict of interest allegations against the board president and a potential vote of no confidence. Patricia responded with her own email an hour later, calling the emergency meeting improper and stating that she would not attend. She insisted that all allegations against her were baseless and defamatory, and she threatened legal action against anyone who continued to spread false information. The homeowners were not impressed. The email chain exploded with people sharing their experiences and calling for Patricia's resignation. A few people defended her, arguing that strict rules were necessary to maintain property values, but they were quickly drowned out by the chorus of complaints. Tuesday afternoon, I noticed a heating oil truck parked in front of Patricia's house. Not her cousin's truck, but a different company entirely. The driver was standing in her driveway talking on his phone, gesturing in frustration. After about 10 minutes, he got back in his truck and drove away without making a delivery. That evening, my neighbor Dorothy called me. "Yates, I just heard something interesting from Carol Morrison, who lives next door to Patricia. Apparently, Patricia's oil tank is almost empty. She called for a delivery yesterday, but her cousin's company couldn't send anyone until Wednesday. So she tried to get a delivery from a different company today, and guess what? They required an HOA approval form." Exactly. The driver said he couldn't make a delivery without proper authorization from the HOA board. Patricia tried to tell him she was the HOA board president and could authorize herself, but the company said they needed formal written approval, not a verbal claim. He drove away without making the delivery. I couldn't help but laugh. "You're telling me Patricia is about to run out of heating oil?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you. And with this cold front, I doubt her cousin can get to her before Thursday at the earliest." Carol said she saw Patricia on the phone looking absolutely furious. The universe had a sense of irony after all. Patricia had blocked my heating oil delivery and left me freezing for days. Now, her own bureaucratic nonsense was coming back to bite her during the coldest weekend of the winter. Wednesday morning brought news that the temperature was going to drop even further. The forecast called for wind chills approaching -30 Thursday night into Friday morning. The governor had issued a cold weather emergency, urging everyone to stay indoors and check on elderly neighbors. I was warm and comfortable in my house, my tank full of oil. I found myself wondering how Patricia was doing. Part of me felt like I should be the bigger person and offer to help. But a larger part of me remembered standing in the street in 15-degree weather, watching my heating oil truck drive away because Patricia had decided to flex her authority. She had shown me no mercy. She had waved at me from her warm house while I was freezing. She had enjoyed my suffering. So I did nothing. Thursday morning I got a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Mr. Edwards, this is Michael Monroe from Superior Comfort Oil. I believe you know my cousin Patricia." "I know her." "Look, I'm calling because Patricia is in a bad situation. Her oil tank is nearly empty, and we're completely backed up because of the cold weather. I can't get a truck to her until Friday afternoon at the earliest. She mentioned that you recently had a delivery from a different company. I was hoping you could give me their contact information so I could arrange something for her. You want me to help Patricia get a heating oil delivery? I know there's been some kind of dispute between you two. Patricia didn't give me details, but this isn't about HOA politics. It's about making sure she doesn't freeze. It's going to be dangerous cold tonight." "You're asking the wrong person, Michael. Patricia is the one who blocked my delivery last week. I spent 4 days freezing in my house while she waved at me from her warm home. She created HOA regulations specifically to benefit your company and hurt your competitors. Now those same regulations are preventing her from getting emergency service from anyone else. That's called irony. So you're just going to let her freeze?" "I'm going to let her experience exactly what she put me through. If she wants heating oil, she can file a request form with the HOA board and wait for approval. I believe the processing time is 5 to 7 business days." I hung up. I felt a small twinge of guilt, but it was overwhelmed by the satisfaction of knowing Patricia was finally facing consequences for her actions. The emergency HOA meeting that evening was packed. The community center meeting room held about 80 people, and there must have been close to 100 homeowners crammed inside. Jennifer Ortiz, Bill Henderson, Martha Keller, and Greg Summers sat at a table at the front. Patricia's chair was conspicuously empty. Jennifer called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. As you know, this emergency meeting was called to address serious allegations of misconduct by our board president, Patricia Monroe. Patricia has declined to attend this evening, which is her right, but we will proceed with the meeting regardless." She outlined the allegations: the conflict of interest regarding Superior Comfort Oil, the targeting of specific homeowners with selective enforcement, and the abuse of her authority to create regulations that benefited her personally. She presented the evidence I had gathered, along with statements from other homeowners about their experiences. Martha Keller, who typically voted with Patricia, looked genuinely shocked. "I had no idea about the oil company connection. Patricia never disclosed that when we voted on the service vehicle regulations. She told us it was about maintaining security and aesthetic standards." Greg Summers nodded. "Same here. If I had known her cousin owned an oil company, I would have questioned the whole thing." "That's a massive conflict of interest." Bill Henderson spoke up. "I voted against those regulations specifically because they seemed designed to give Patricia too much control over homeowners' daily lives. But I didn't know about the family connection either. That's beyond inappropriate." Jennifer looked at the assembled homeowners. "The board has consulted with our attorney. who confirmed that Patricia's actions constitute a serious breach of her fiduciary duty to this community. We have several options. We can ask for her resignation, we can vote to remove her from the board, or we can take legal action. I'd like to open the floor for discussion. Hands shot up around the room. One by one, homeowners stood and shared their stories. The pattern was clear. Patricia had used her position to bully, intimidate, and punish anyone who disagreed with her. The stories ranged from petty to vindictive, painting a picture of someone who had turned HOA governance into personal warfare. Then Dorothy Chang stood up. I want to add something. I live 2 doors down from Patricia. This afternoon, I saw her husband loading their 2 dogs into their car along with suitcases. They drove away around 4 in the afternoon. I spoke to her next-door neighbor Carol, who said Patricia's oil tank ran empty this morning. They've gone to stay in a hotel because their house is too cold. The room erupted in conversation. Someone shouted, "She's staying in a hotel because of her own stupid regulations." Jennifer banged her gavel. "Order, please. I understand emotions are running high, but we need to proceed formally. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of removing Patricia Monroe from her position as HOA Board President for breach of fiduciary duty and conflict of interest, please raise your hand." The vote was nearly unanimous. Out of about 95 homeowners present, only 3 voted against removal. Jennifer counted the votes and made it official. By overwhelming vote of the homeowners, Patricia Monroe is hereby removed as president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association, effective immediately. I further move that we refer this matter to an attorney to determine if legal action is warranted for the financial benefit she and her family may have received through her position. That motion passed as well. The meeting continued for another hour, with the board voting to suspend enforcement of the service vehicle regulations pending a full review and repealing several other unpopular rules Patricia had pushed through. They also voted to refund all fines issued in the past 6 months and to create a new oversight committee to prevent future abuses of power. I left the meeting feeling vindicated but also exhausted. The whole situation had been so unnecessary, so stupid. If Patricia had just let my heating oil delivery happen, none of this would have occurred. But her need for control and her willingness to abuse her authority had finally caught up with her. Friday morning arrived with the coldest temperatures of the winter. -4 degrees, with wind chills near -30. The kind of cold that was genuinely dangerous, where exposed skin could get frostbite in minutes. I stayed inside my warm house and worked from home, grateful for my full oil tank and functioning furnace. Around 10 in the morning, I saw a Superior Comfort oil truck pull up to Patricia's house. Michael Monroe himself was driving. He spent about 45 minutes there, presumably filling her tank and making sure everything was working. I wondered if he would charge her his standard emergency service fee, or if family ties meant she got a discount on the consequences of her own actions. That afternoon, I got a call from Marcus Levine. "Yates, I've got news." I sent the demand letter to Patricia on Wednesday, and I just received a response from her attorney. She's agreed to resign from the HOA board and to issue a formal apology. She's also agreed to disclose the conflict of interest regarding her cousin's business to all homeowners and to reimburse the HOA for any legal fees incurred. What about the fines she threatened me with? All dropped. In fact, as part of the settlement, she's agreed not to pursue any enforcement action against you or any other homeowner related to the service vehicle regulations. She's basically admitting that those regulations were improper. Did she have any choice? The HOA already voted to remove her. True, but she could have fought it. She could have claimed the vote was improper or filed a lawsuit. Instead, she's accepting everything. My read is that she knows she's in a bad position legally and doesn't want this to get worse. If we pursued formal legal action, we could potentially go after her for damages, and her cousin's company could face scrutiny as well. She's cutting her losses. So it's over. It's over. You won. The following week, Patricia sent a formal letter to all Maple Ridge homeowners. It was brief and clearly written by an attorney, but it hit the main points. She acknowledged failing to disclose her relationship to Superior Comfort Oil when proposing the service vehicle regulations. She apologized for any inconvenience or hardship caused by her actions. She announced her resignation from the HOA board, effective immediately. The whole thing was less than 3 paragraphs and contained no real emotion or accountability, but it was official. The new HOA board, led by Jennifer Ortiz as the newly elected president, moved quickly to undo Patricia's damage. The service vehicle regulations were completely repealed. A new policy was put in place requiring all board members to disclose any financial conflicts of interest. An appeals process was created for homeowners who felt they were being unfairly targeted. The board even hired a professional management company to handle day-to-day HOA operations, reducing the power any single board member could wield. In February, I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. I was in the produce section when I turned and saw her examining apples 2 bins away. She saw me at the same moment. For a few seconds, we just looked at each other. Then she spoke. "I suppose you're happy with how everything turned out." "I'm happy I can get heating oil delivered to my house, yes. I was trying to maintain standards, to make our community better. You were trying to control people and punish anyone who disagreed with you. There's a difference." She put down the apple she was holding. "You know, I never meant for things to go so far. The service vehicle regulations really were about maintaining order. The fact that my cousin owned an oil company was just a coincidence." "Patricia, you blocked my heating oil delivery in the middle of January and then waved at me from your warm house. You weren't maintaining order. You were being cruel. And then you experienced exactly what you put me through, and you couldn't handle it for even 1 day. My husband has a heart condition. We couldn't risk staying in a cold house. I didn't know that. You didn't know my situation either. You didn't care. That was the problem." She didn't respond. After a moment, she picked up her shopping basket and walked away. I never saw her at an HOA meeting again. By March, Maple Ridge felt like a different community. The new board was responsive and reasonable. Homeowners felt heard rather than harassed. The constant stream of violation notices and threats stopped. People actually started attending HOA meetings not out of fear, but because they wanted to participate in community decisions. The pool opened on schedule in May with fresh paint and new equipment. The playground was upgraded with modern, safe structures. The common areas were maintained with care. Everything Patricia had claimed required higher fees and stricter rules was accomplished with the existing budget and reasonable governance. I stayed involved with the HOA after that winter. I attended meetings regularly, served on a couple of committees, and even considered running for the board myself. I had learned that HOAs could be positive forces when led by people who actually cared about the community rather than personal power. Dorothy Chang became something of a community watchdog, always ready to spot and report abuse of authority. She took her role seriously, attending every meeting and asking pointed questions whenever something seemed off. The board members learned quickly that they couldn't slip anything past Dorothy. Bill Henderson told me months later that he had done some digging into Superior Comfort Oil's business practices. Turns out they had similar arrangements with HOAs in 3 other communities, all of which had board members who were family members or business associates of Michael Monroe. Bill reported his findings to the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, and an investigation was opened. I never followed up on what happened with that, but I liked knowing that someone was looking into it. The heating oil incident became something of a legend in Maple Ridge. New homeowners would hear the story and shake their heads in disbelief. It became a cautionary tale about the importance of oversight and the danger of letting any one person accumulate too much power in community governance. For me, it was a reminder that standing up to bullies matters. I could have just accepted Patricia's decision, stayed in a hotel for a week, and avoided the whole confrontation. But that would have meant letting her continue abusing her authority, and the next person might not have had the resources or the will to fight back. I also learned that even small acts of corruption have consequences. Patricia probably thought she was being clever, creating regulations that helped her cousin's business while maintaining plausible deniability. She probably never imagined it would all unravel over a blocked heating oil delivery. But that's how these things work. You can get away with small abuses for a while, but eventually you push too far and everything collapses. That summer, I installed a propane backup heating system in my house. Just a small unit that could keep my home above freezing if the oil ever ran out again. It cost about $3,000, but it gave me peace of mind. I never wanted to be in a position where I was at the mercy of an HOA board member's whims again. In September, Patricia and her husband put their house up for sale. The listing went live on a Thursday, and I saw the sign go up Friday morning. They were asking a fair price, and the house sold within 3 weeks. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they were moving to Florida, where they had bought a condo in a community with no HOA. I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Patricia, who had been such a zealous enforcer of HOA regulations, was fleeing to a place where no one could tell her what to do with her property. Maybe she had learned something from the experience after all. The day the moving truck came to pack up Patricia's house, I was working in my front yard. She came over as I was trimming my hedges, keeping them at exactly the approved height out of habit. "I wanted to say goodbye," she said, "and I wanted to apologize." Really apologize, not the legal letter my attorney made me send. I put down my hedge trimmers. Okay. I got too caught up in the rules and the power. I thought I was helping the community, but really I was just on a power trip. When my own oil ran out that weekend, and I was calling companies and getting told I needed HOA approval, it hit me how ridiculous the whole thing was. I had created a system that ended up hurting me too. That's usually how these things work. I know you probably won't believe this, but I really didn't create those regulations just to help my cousin. That was part of it, sure, but I genuinely thought stricter oversight would make our community better. I just couldn't see how controlling it had become. Patricia, the problem wasn't the regulations themselves. It was how you enforced them. You used them as weapons against people you didn't like. You enjoyed making people squirm. That's not governance. That's just being mean. She nodded slowly. You're right. I did enjoy it. There was something satisfying about catching people in violations, about having that authority. It was wrong. "Are you going to be on the HOA board in your new condo community?" She laughed, a genuine sound without any bitterness. "God, no. I'm done with HOAs forever. I just want to live my life without worrying about everyone else's lawn height or fence color. Good luck in Florida." "Thanks. And Yates, I really am sorry about the heating oil. That was cruel and you didn't deserve it." She walked back to her house and I went back to trimming my hedges. 2 days later, The house was empty and Patricia was gone. A young couple with a baby bought the house in October, and they were delightful neighbors who never once mentioned HOA regulations. By the time winter rolled around again, the heating oil incident had faded into community history. The HOA was functioning smoothly under Jennifer's leadership, and Maple Ridge felt like an actual community rather than a police state. I got my heating oil deliveries without incident, my tank full and ready for whatever New England winter could throw at it. Looking back, I'm glad the whole thing happened. Not the freezing part, obviously, but the confrontation with Patricia and the transformation of our HOA. It showed me that ordinary people really can make a difference when they stand up against injustice. Even injustice as seemingly trivial as HOA overreach. It showed me that bullies eventually face consequences, even if those consequences sometimes come in the form of their own rules being turned against them. And it taught me to always keep my oil tank above half full, because you never know when an HOA Karen might decide to make your life difficult. Some lessons are learned the hard way, but at least they stick with you. The story of that January became my favorite tale to tell at neighborhood barbecues and holiday parties. Let me tell you about the time the HOA president blocked my heating oil delivery and then ran out of oil herself during the coldest weekend of the year. It always got a laugh, and it always sparked conversations about HOA governance and the importance of keeping board members accountable. Maple Ridge had learned its lesson. We had given Patricia too much power and paid the price. But we had also learned we could take that power back when necessary. That knowledge changed everything. The HOA still existed, still had rules and regulations, but now everyone understood that those rules served the community, not the other way around. As for me, I never missed another HOA meeting. I stayed informed, asked questions, and made sure no one person ever accumulated the kind of unchecked authority Patricia had wielded. And every time I heard my furnace kick on during a cold winter night, warming my house with that steady, reliable heat, I felt grateful. Grateful for the warmth, yes, but also grateful for the reminder that sometimes standing up for yourself leads to positive change for everyone. The heating oil gauge in my basement became something I checked religiously. Never again would I let it drop below half full. Never again would I be vulnerable to someone else's pettiness or power plays. That tank stayed full, just like my resolve to never let a HOA Karen push me around again. Some victories are small and personal, but they matter just as much as the big ones. Maybe more, because they're the ones we live with every single day.